All right. Well, thanks again for joining us today, Angelica. I know that Dallas audiences have become quite familiar with you over the past few years. So I wanted to first start by having you talk about how your initial introduction with the DSO began and how the relationship has progressed and led to other collaborations.
Thank you so much for having me. Um, I I'm very fortunate to have a relationship with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra that has started. It started around 2020. I was their composer in residence from 2020 to 2022. The first year was a really weird year because of obviously COVID. But then I was able to be there and I wrote a piece for them. For organ and orchestra, and also curated some concerts featuring women composers and other composers I loved, and was part of a symposium of women in classical music. And then after that, I wrote for them a piece 2 years ago for orchestra and singer Lido Pimienta, who's a wonderful friend and a great Colombian musician. And that was another great experience. They also took my piece, What Keeps Me Awake, on their European tour. So I'm really grateful for their support and love working with them. And now I'm back in a few days to premiere my most ambitious project to date, I think.
Yes, tell me about this. It's a world premiere. It's called For Everything You Keep Losing. Um, Described as an elegy for lost sounds. So, talk more about the inspiration for the piece and what these lost sounds are.
So this new piece is it's in the style of a requiem, and the title comes from a verse from a poem by Roque Raquel Salas Rivera, who's a Puerto Rican poet. I used four different Puerto Rican poets for the libretto of the text for this piece, and the piece explores sonic loss and erasure of sonic diversity through as it is connected to habitat destruction, species extinction, and the climate crisis. So it uses actual field recordings of a melting glacier, some whales that we no longer have. Same with some birds and frogs, native frogs from Puerto Rico, which is where I'm from. It does use those sounds and references that those sounds that are no longer part of our soundscape. But at the same time, it also connects that to issues of disaster capitalism, language lost due to colonialism, displacement of communities. So it starts with climate crisis as the seed and sounds from the environment that we don't get to hear anymore, but it also expands to other losses that are connected to oppression. And as a Puerto Rican, also it's a piece that's very dear to my heart and that deals a lot with displacement of communities in the island as well.
One of your trademarks as a composer is to incorporate the unexpected, whether it's, like you said, sound effects or unconventional instruments. So, tell me about your philosophy when it comes to composing.
Well, I think of every sound as musical, and I'm really interested in bringing to spaces like concert halls that not often have other sounds that come from unusual um, sources or beyond classical instrumentation or traditional instruments. I'm really interested in bringing those sounds from our environment and sounds from domestic sounds from my kitchen, sounds from voices from people that I love or people that inspire me. I'm really interested in putting those in conversation with more traditional instruments and having one kind of elevate the other and see what happens when they come into dialogue and how that hopefully resonates with audiences and brings up and evokes other images and associations and personal and distant memories.
For any of our listeners who are not yet familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your musical journey and your upbringing in Puerto Rico and how you eventually got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, a small island in the Caribbean, and I grew up as a violinist, and I always loved music, but I didn't quite feel like I was going to be a concert violinist. I just did not know that composing was a possibility because even when I was in orchestras, I never played something by someone that was alive. So it took me a little while to realize what I wanted to do was to compose for many different instruments. And I moved to New York to pursue a master's and then a doctorate, and then have stayed here. I'm in Brooklyn right now and go back and forth a lot between Puerto Rico and New York, and my music is very much preoccupied, I would say, with highlighting the magic in the domestic and the quotidian, and also by hopefully sparking curiosity in listeners um, and finding ways to incorporate sounds that you might not expect together. I'm really drawn to unusual and unconventional instrumentations, but I also love melodies and harmonies and textures, and in this piece, it's a joy to be able to not only write for the full DSO, which is one of my favorite orchestras, but also to expand the palette with a huge chorus and also for soloists that are going to be joining us.
That's so it's a lot going on there. And the Meyerson is just such a wonderful hall for to just like let it all wash over you. So
It's
it's
gorgeous hall too, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So what was your first big break as far as composing? Like what was the first thing that you saw was the turning point into the next taking your career to the next level?
Well, I would say I my first like big break, I would say 10 years ago, I wrote my first commission for orchestra. Um, and it was for the American Composers Orchestra, and it was a short piece, but also incorporated some unusual instruments. And I um I always say that even though that was my first paid commission, that before that I was really lucky to have the support of the Puerto Rico Symphony. They used to do these workshops in the island for young composers. So I had two of my orchestral pieces that were done in those workshops, and I had recordings of those. And with those recordings, I was able to then have other orchestras listen to the music I was writing, because that's one of the things that are the most challenging to young composers or composers in general, is to have an orchestra play your music. So I'm really grateful for that initiative from the Puerto Rico Symphony. And through that, I got this commission from the American Composers Orchestra. And then I was at the same time also writing a lot of solo pieces for friends, solo violin, electronics, solo clarinet, electronics, and developing my voice through those more experimental and more and smaller configurations. But then I started to be pleasantly surprised by getting more and more orchestral commissions. And yeah, I'm still kind of in shock that I get to write for orchestra so much, because it's such a luxury as a composer, and also not only to write for orchestras, but to also be able to have long sustained relationships with really wonderful orchestras like the DSO.
Two questions here. Who have been what have been some of the composers, living or not, who
Mm.
have kind of been who you've drawn inspiration from in your writing, and who are some of your mentors, either living or not, also?
Um, I would say these are long gone by now, but the first sound that I heard that I was like, this, I want to do this, was Shostakovich. Um, it was a composer that when I heard him, just kind of blew my mind of the possibilities of sounds, and Ligeti as well. And then living, I would say people like Meredith Monk, Julia Wolf, Caroline Shaw. Um, are huge inspirations, Natalie Joche also, and mentors and also inspiration. Tania Leon is a great mentor, and I'm really lucky to have studied with her for many years. And yeah, just a lot of, for me, it's, I would say, people that are making music that's unapologetically them, that sounds just, it's just very uniquely theirs. I really admire that.
I love that. Just random question. I see, is that a whiteboard behind you? I'm imagining like,
It
is
is,
this
yeah.
what's all going on in your life? This is like all your life stuff back there with everything you're working on?
Yeah, well, that's I have to update it. That is the Requiem still back there. So there's like Benedictus, Lux Aeterna, Paradisum. That's but right now I'm the project that I'm currently working on, it's mostly on post-its and on the other side of the room. And I have to put it up on the whiteboard. But yeah,
Is
it's
the whiteboard a part of your compositional process? Like I still, when I think of people writing music, I imagine, you know, paper, pen, desk, but are you more of like a on the wall in really big letters kind of person?
Yes, very much so. And at the same time, I say like a sound hoarder. I'm with a little recorder or with my iPhone, depending of whether or not I have my recorder, always collecting sounds from the environment and or sounds that I hear that are interesting, and then creating folders of those. But yeah, very visual, and sometimes it's words in the whiteboard, sometimes it's sketches of like with different colors of form of the piece that I think it's gonna start this way and then it's gonna get bigger and then it's gonna be bluer, or like just and things that might change in the process. But just for me, it's, I'm always much better by a visual, starting with a visual or poetic or more abstract starting place rather than notes themselves. Um, yeah, that's always been the case.
This reminds me of like a few years ago, Dallas Museum of Art had an exhibit. It was a lot of installations, and there was the coolest thing that was, and I'll have to find the name of the artist, but it was this big like black sphere, and within it, it had all of these. You'd have to like put your ear up to it, and they had recorded these sounds from all over the world of like
Oh,
children playing or cafes or whatever, like every just world sounds that had all been kind of embedded in this giant just like black sphere, and it was
that
so
sounds
cool.
incredible. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I can't remember the story of who all was involved in going out and recording all of these different sounds, but yeah, it was just like sounds of life.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, really neat. So I'll
Yeah.
try to see if I can
Yeah, I
find the
would
name
love
of that.
to check that out. Yeah, I mean, sounds, I think you said it, sounds of life are also, and sounds of music as well. So for me, a sound is connected to a word or a person or a taste or a smell or a memory. Um, and that's what I want my music to evoke in others too, is to awaken those senses. So I'm always kind of tracing my own sound maps with those associations.
Yeah, yeah, like for me, as far as like sensory recall, smell is
Mm,
huge. It is like it is so I can time travel with certain scents.
yeah.
Um, but that might be a little harder through like the audio through audio. I don't
Yes.
know.
Yeah. That's making me think of other possibilities. Might have to dig into that technology. Um, but yeah, it's I love when, um when we can awaken other senses through sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. What other projects are keeping you busy right now, and what's on the horizon for you? What's next?
So right now I'm working on a big project, the cello concerto, which is my first. concerto ever, and it is for the LA Phil for Gustavo Dudamel's last season with the LA Phil, and the soloist is Yo-Yo Ma. So very excited about that one, and also terrified and all the things, um, but feeling in really good company, and wasn't so sure what a concerto for me would sound like because I'm not someone that's like interested so much in like virtuosic writing. But then talking with Yo-Yo, it's become evident that it's a really great pairing, and um, he's just interested in me writing something that reinvents what a concerto is, and that showcases what he can learn from his community, which is the orchestra, rather than focus on him as an individual, which I think is quite beautiful. So I'm really excited about that. That's premiering in May, and that's right now my my main project. And I'm also at the same time trying to finish my first solo album.
Easier, I mean, no, easier, that's not even the right word. What is it like, say, and I know this is your first concerto, but because I know sometimes there have been lots of times where people have written a concerto and they don't know who's going to be the soloist
Hmm.
for it. Other times you're writing it for this soloist, like the way that you are. Um, how how is that? Is that easier or harder? And do you, I know obviously you said you consulted with him as well as far as kind of like what your vision is and making sure it's kind of in line with his. But kind of talk on that a little bit because I did not know about this Yo-Yo Ma concerto, and that is huge. That is so exciting, and to be able to write for him, is it, how does that kind of work its way through the process? You have, you know already what this soloist is capable of and
Yeah.
what their strengths are.
Yeah. I mean, I even if it's not a piece that's showcasing an individual like a concerto, I love writing for people rather than instruments. um, Having I mean that's harder when working in orchestra settings, but right now that I've worked with the Dallas Symphony, I kind of have in mind some of the musicians, but I love knowing the person that's playing, and so and the more I know about them and know their way of playing, that the easier for me or the more meaningful it feels to write for them. In this case, it's someone that's so legendary that I it becomes a little bit at the beginning it was a little bit overwhelming just because it's just a person that um even family members that I have that really didn't quite understand what I have been doing for the past 20 years as a career now get it because they know who Yo-Yo Ma is. It's that big of a deal. um and I would say at first it was a little bit overwhelming, but because it is a collaboration and the concerto is being designed for him, it's right now it's much more about our conversations and about what he's interested in. We're looking a lot about different ways of communication and different ways of a collaboration that happen in the orchestra, but as using, for example, like coral reefs, and what's happening to them as metaphor for the organism of the orchestra and the different types of collaborations that can happen. So it's all coming from a place of that we're both really curious about and passionate about. And then it feels fun to find ways to realize that musically, and because it's not it's interesting is he's like he doesn't want it to be about himself because he's such a generous person, but it's a cello concerto that's showcasing him.
Yeah,
So I'm right now in the middle of like finding that balance, but the more I keep writing, the more I'm like, if I stay true to our conversations and it feels like it's going in the right direction.
yeah. I mean, think about like some of the greatest concertos by the greatest composers were written for the greatest soloists and all when they already had that person in mind. And what a blessing to be able to like um consult with them and you know them and like you said, you're writing for a person instead of an instrument. And you know, I think of like the great soloists, past and present, even like Joseph Joachim or Andre Segovia, or all these virtuosos who had composers come to them and say, what do you think about this? And how do you feel about this? Or, how you vibing with this particular passage.
Yeah.
So that's super
It,
exciting.
yeah, exactly. And I think I'm also really interested in, in the past few years I've written a symphony. I've written many works for orchestra, but I wrote a symphony, which I never thought I would write. And now a requiem for the Dallas Symphony, and now a cello concerto. And I used to be very much not interested in those traditional forms because I didn't see myself in them. But now I'm having a lot of fun with realizing that a symphony, a requiem, a concerto can really be whatever I want it to be. Um, and I and I can also be a part of what the sound of those traditional forms are moving forward. So that's exciting, and instead of like holding that historical baggage on my shoulders, um, allowing myself to embrace that and also have fun with it.
This is a random question, but because you're in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
You're, and we have a choral director who spends half his time in Brooklyn and half in Dallas, named Sam Brookman, and he has
Mm.
a group called Verdigris Ensemble, and they had a program that this just reminds me so much of it. Like it almost seems like I feel like I'm going to send it to you. They had a show, a work called The Endangered, which was what they called an immersive choral performance.
Mm.
Um, it was a mass for the
Oh, was
endangered.
this Sarah
And
Sarah Kirkland Snyder's piece?
yes,
Yes, I
yes,
didn't
yes,
see the
yes.
premiere, but I have heard the piece, and Sarah is a dear friend and one of my favorite composers too. Yeah.
Yeah, or I don't know if they premiered it, but they performed it a
Hmm.
couple years ago. And yeah, Sam's a great person to know. He's up there in Brooklyn too.
Oh, that's
Brookman.
great. I didn't know
Yeah,
the connection between Dallas and Brooklyn too. That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous piece. And as I was writing this requiem, Sarah's mass for the endangered also came to mind as a powerful reference. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to hear it. And is there anything else I haven't asked you that you'd like to add, either about uh, being in Dallas, DSO, anything I've left out?
Um, no, I mean, I would only add that I'm really grateful for the continued support of the Dallas Symphony and Maestro Luisi, and because it's very rare that living composers get to have these relationships with orchestras. And I don't know if I would ever write a requiem if it were not for this relationship with them. So it's really meaningful to me that they continue to support my work and trust my work. And I'm super excited to share it next week with audiences in Dallas and some family that's traveling from Puerto Rico to see it as well.
Great, and you'll be here for it?
And I'll be there. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, maybe I'll bump into you while I'm
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Please come say
And
hello.
yeah,
Yeah.
and thanks again. We always enjoy, having you here, listening to your music, and congrats on a world premiere. And I will definitely be looking forward to this cello concerto.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.